Hey, how's it going? Chris here. So, after going through the media literacy reading, one of the big things I couldn't help but notice was just this idea that education and entertainment are slowly but surely getting closer and closer and closer together to the point that they're pretty darn well indistinguishable nowadays. Of course, up at the forefront of all that are video games, the perfect fusion of education and entertainment. Now, I'm a pretty avid gamer myself, and I've known for a while that video games can actually teach you a lot of good stuff. But now, especially that I'm making the first big steps in my educational career, I couldn't help but think about why that is. Just what is it about video games that would make them such a solid educational tool and a great use of technology and media within the classroom? And so, after thinking things out for a little bit, I've come up with three solid reasons as to why. So, let's get started. Reason number one. Video games make excellent make an excellent tool to introduce students to new ideas and topics. Case in point, a fine little game called BioShock. Now, the game's premise is that it's set in this underwater dystopia called Rapture, and the city itself is founded upon objectivist ideals. And for those of you who don't know, objectivism refers to the personal philosophy of Ayn Rand, and it's kind of a big deal. However, coming into the game, I didn't have the slightest clue about objectivism. I had no idea what it was about. I'd simply never been introduced to it in high school, even though apparently a lot of schools read it. Thing is, though, after going through the game, I felt like I had a solid grasp of the main tenets of the philosophy and the way it worked. But not only that, I got to see how it might look from a societal perspective, how it might impact people and their daily lives. And all said, I ended up having much more interest in the topic than I ever would have had I read some paragraph on Wikipedia or in a textbook. Thing is, though, it's not just Bioshock. There are other games, plenty of others, that cover an equally broad range of subjects and topics. And simply due to their nature, they're almost always intrinsically more interesting than how they may be presented in a traditional educational setting. So, moving on. Point number two. Video games do a wonderful job of promoting critical thinking. And there's no better example of this than the Legend of Zelda series. Now, the Zelda series is pretty well known for its puzzle solving. And with the puzzles, they make it a point to have players use every single tool at their disposal to make it through the puzzles and thus progress through the game. However, it's usually not that cut and dried. You have to use your tools and resources in a way that you may not be accustomed to. You have to think outside of the box, use them in some new ways, and think about how everything might come together to do something else, something bigger. That sort of critical thinking is incredibly valuable. And even though it's a video game, you can benefit so much from using skills like that in the real world. And sort of like the article mentioned, it's critical thinking like that that's becoming more and more demanded by today's job providers and companies and so forth. And really, I'd take playing a video game to get that sort of stuff over binge reading a textbook any day. But moving on, we have our last point, number three. And that is that games do an amazing job of broadening players' horizons. You see, um, with a lot of games, there's often some sort of international component involved. They'll either provide a they'll either provide alternate text options for users to where they can select the language they want to play in, or there will be some games that are set in a completely different country but then localized into whatever respective language the game is being marketed towards. And the thing is, this not only allows students to use video games as a second language learning tool, the fact that they're given the privilege to experience other countries and cultures in an interactive way is just mind blowing when you think of its implications. For instance, I've played several games set in Japan, and as a result, when I finally went over to Japan just this past summer, I felt much more comfortable with the culture and general way of life than I would have had I gone in blind. Of course, studying the language for 4 years didn't hurt either. But the point remains the same. Um, Video games can allow students to broaden their horizons so much and experience so much more of the world than whatever's contained within the tiny walls of their school. So, yeah, all things considered, I think video games can make a truly effective use of technology and media within the classroom, and especially in today's society, that's incredibly valuable. Still, thanks for listening, and I hope you all enjoyed. Thanks.